All right, ladies and gentlemen, it seems like both Xbox players and PlayStation players are getting called out as those who do not necessarily patronize nor buy games across the board. In the case of Xbox, it's many things. You don't buy games because you guys don't want to pay for games, or you don't buy games anymore because it's on Game Pass and the expectation is that, that people bring their games to Game Pass so that you don't have to pay for them. Apparently, there are two positions and two opinions that you will hear from some content creators, YouTubers, streamers who talk about this stuff. And I want you to go ahead and listen to two contrasting positions from which these statements are coming from. One about Xbox, the other about PlayStation. The first one is from the Friends Per Second podcast, which is Skill Up Jake Baldino and another co-host. And listen to what was said in this particular clip that this James person put together here on Twitter.
How much are developers sacrificing in order to prop up that model? I don't know the answers to that, right? Interestingly, Edmund, a member of my team, he reached out to about a dozen game makers to ask them, like, how are you feeling about publishing games on Xbox? And one of the things that came back from a few of those developers was the idea that it's not worth putting your game, and there's smaller game makers, by the way, AA and indie, and they're like, it's not worth putting your game on Xbox unless you have a Game Pass deal, because Xbox consumers are essentially conditioned now to expect their games on Game Pass.
This is a very interesting perspective that Xbox gamers are conditioned to expect their games on Game Pass. It appears that Microsoft has basically accomplished a huge phase of what it is they're trying to do. They're trying to change the industry. I see a lot of people saying this and trying to use it as a one-up on, Xbox gamers, but I don't think that's really the case. I think Xbox gamers are far and wide. People choose to do what they want with their games, but here's a contrasting perspective from Colin Moriarty in his more recent podcast with David Haffey, and I was surprised to hear this. And I think this is in a different context as well, especially he tags it here by saying PlayStation's focus on high quality fare for adults help them dominate the console space. Now, it seems they're turning to ship to compete with a much stauncher and more formidable competitor, Nintendo. Can Sony ever hope to reignite the variety of the PS1 and PS2 days? So, the whole conversation of Sony taking its games to Nintendo is simply because its PlayStation audience is not so interested in playing its own games for the most part as well. Think about it. Nintendo and its exclusives compared to PlayStation and its touted exclusives are day and night. PlayStation's highest sold exclusive that is not a third-party IP, aka Spider-Man, has sold maybe about 28 million copies. Nintendo easily rakes in 50 plus million copies at the end of the day. So on both sides, what this tells me, instead of concluding that Xbox players are not playing games because of Game Pass or saying PlayStation players are only playing Call of Duty, is that in order for people to be able to break through, they have to, this is the, the strategy of, Xbox and PlayStation. In order for them to be able to break through, they have to pivot. The developers that said, if you bring your game to Xbox, it's not worth it because you may not get your return. I think we're seeing a thing where these developers are not necessarily paying attention to the gaming market that is also surrounding them as well. Now, I'm working on my own video game as an indie developer, so market research has been something that I've basically dabbled my hand into to figure out the gaming space to the best of my ability. But what I've seen in terms of the market is right now the market is actually growing into a much more saturated market. I'm not saying that it's reached a saturation point. However, if you look at, say, 2014 compared to 2024, in 2014, 10 years ago, only 1,715 games were released the whole year on Steam. As of 2024, 8,241 games have already been released, and it's just June this year. This is a crazy, crazy comparison when it comes to actually looking at the, what is going on here. Last year, there were 14,527 games. In all reality, that is over 1,000 games every month. So Game Pass is not the problem of the developers. The stiff competition going on right now is actually the biggest challenge, trying to get the attention of gamers across the board. Baldur's Gate 3 was a game that launched, even though it launched late on Xbox, still did well, refused to talk about even entertaining the thought of a Game Pass deal, and sold decently well. Hogwarts Legacy sold decently well. Cyberpunk 2077 sold decently well. Most Xbox gamers are not expecting that every big AAA game will make its way to Game Pass. I think that is just a misnomer. And the small developers that are saying so, that it's not worth it, I hope to say to you guys that you're very certain about that strategy, because I myself, as an indie dev, I would love to get my game on Xbox and PlayStation 5. I would love to get it on the PS4 if I possibly can, because these are audiences that will be happily served by your video game if you're able to take it to the platform that they are. So if they don't want to put their games on Game Pass, shout out to PlayStation, shout out to Xbox. We're going to be putting our application in for our video game. If you see it, just know that we're happy and we're excited to get this game into the hands of gamers wherever they are. And many of you know I'm a PC aficionado, but when it comes to a video game, you know I'm not big on exclusives in any way. I want gamers to be able to play the games wherever it is that they want on the day that the developers can deliver it to them. And that's another thing too, is most developers, if they realize that their game scope is so big, they kind of back out and say, we're going to get you the Xbox version later. But I think what might be going on too is Xbox has put itself in a really interesting corner where it has that Series S that requires extra time for the developers to work on compared to the PS5, which is just one system, and the developers can basically scale their development in that way. Most developers have found out that if we just basically scale our game and cut our coats according to our cloth and make a game that can actually be shipped on the same day, they basically get the same amount of success. So that's basically what you want to do. And if it's probably too big, then you probably want to make sure that you are, being realistic at the end of the day and thinking about the consoles in mind from the very first day you start developing your video game. In fact, just a few hours ago, I was talking to one of the members of our team, and we were talking about control schemes to toggle walk and toggle run, because some of the games that we've been looking at, like, okay, how does this game do it? How does Arkham do it? How does this other game do it? In terms of like what we're working on and what we're making, these decisions are being factored in to make sure that the console experience is already settled by the time the game comes out. And so, yeah, some of the members of my team were telling me like, yo, this does not feel good on a controller. You need to think about it again. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So we're over here not just worried about making the mouse and keyboard controls, but we're trying to ensure that the controller version, when it hits console, is going to be solid at the end of the day. These are the things that I think many developers may be missing when it comes to thinking about their video game development cycle overall. There are many more things that I can talk about here, but to be very honest, these are competitive things that I've just studied by myself. And honestly, I don't want to talk about them in this video because I think all of that work and all of that research, if I go ahead and start saying this stuff, is just giving it away for free. All I'll say to you guys is this: look at your favorite video games, where they're selling, how many copies they're selling on day 1, 2, 3, and month 3 is not what you should be looking at anymore. You should be taking time to follow the life cycle of the game. And that's when you're going to really see how many of these games are able to, stay sustainable. Many of these game developers and publishers are able to do it. The small indie developers that feel it's not worth it, perhaps it's not worth it for them. Perhaps it's not worth it for their teams. I'm not saying that they have to suck it up and, make things happen. I'm just saying that if they really wanted to harness the ecosystem, there are many things that they must factor in. And perhaps when they were making their game from scratch, console may not have necessarily been in the pipeline, because at this point, if you're not building your game from scratch to already leverage the consoles, then it's only a back end, it's an afterthought anyways. So basically what's going to happen is the development team, for the most part, is going to develop from the perspective of what's convenient, what's capable, or what's feasible for us. But if they started from ground up, they'll be able to launch on whichever consoles that they want to go ahead and launch. I mean, sometimes the game cannot even necessarily, make its way out on time. And Xbox is basically the only console where a game can actually go in early access. So if that's actually what these folk are saying, then they're missing out on all the other possibilities that Xbox even provides its developers as well. Because think about it, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, how are you going to go ahead and, how are you going to go ahead and dismiss Power World? Power World would probably not have been able to come out at the time that it came out, were it not the fact that Xbox actually provides and gives, its own developers, if somebody wants to basically bring their game to, the platform in early access, it's only on Xbox that you're actually capable of doing that. PlayStation is not going to allow you to do it. So at the end of the day, I think it all boils down to how the games resonate with the audiences, how the studios are making their games, what they're thinking about, the circumstances out there, because that's a huge difference. I mean, you got to really consider and factor all that stuff into perspective. I mean, think about it. Colin Moriarty just called out PlayStation fans saying when Japan studio closed, everybody was saying, oh, Japan studio, oh no. But most of them did not buy those games when Japan studio was making them. I mean, it is quite funny, though, that a lot of PlayStation players will come out here and start talking about, Xbox players not buying games while their own studios are getting shut down. Even some of their studios that have made some of their prominent games are getting shut down. Some of the games that were beloved are not getting remakes because they're not buying them. How many copies of Bloodborne did y'all buy? And every year this thing is trending. Only 7 million copies that magnificent game sold. Why would From Software want to bother themselves in making another one? Why would Sony want to invest in making another one? It's a niche game because PlayStation players apparently love Call of Duty, just like Xbox players possibly maybe love Game Pass, and it's free Call of Duty. So across the board, gamers are going to play what they want to play. So this whole conversation has just so much that's factored in. And I think we need to basically look at it from all kinds of different perspectives, because if you take the approach of saying, oh, it's because of just this one factor or a few developers who may have a different, strategy and idea and pipeline, you're going to miss out everything that's going on. This is my own 2 cents on this particular video. I wanted to go ahead and share my thoughts. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. I appreciate you guys' time and audience, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.